I came home from a double shift to find my suitcase on the porch. My sister-in-law was inside laughing. She thought working made her worth something. My husband looked out the window, then drew the curtains. "We're starting fresh. Without you," he texted. I had $43 and no place to go. But 1 year later, they showed up at my office, not knowing I was now. I came home from a double shift to find my suitcase sitting on the porch like it had been waiting for me to fail. It was just after 9:30 p.m. I'd been on my feet since 6 a.m. the day before, working a double at the assisted living center just outside Durham, North Carolina. I was used to long days. I picked up every shift I could because my husband, Daryl, had been between jobs for the better part of a year. His sister, Trina, had moved in after her second divorce, saying she just needed a couple weeks to get back on her feet. That was 6 months ago. She never paid a cent toward rent or groceries. I never said anything. I figured we were all family. I was raised to hold things down, not complain. Keep the peace. Pay the bills. Work hard and your people will see you, appreciate you. Right?
Wrong.
When I pulled into the driveway, I saw it instantly, my suitcase. Then my larger suitcase. Then a trash bag stuffed with some of my clothes. All of it piled on the porch like I was a guest overstaying my welcome. At first, I thought maybe something bad happened. A gas leak? A fire? I reached for my keys, but when I tried the lock, it wouldn't turn. They'd changed it. That's when I heard her laugh.
Trina.
Inside. Loud, smug, unbothered. She thought working made her worth something, she said, like she was talking to a TV audience. My heart dropped. I knocked on the door.
Once.
Then again. I pounded. "Daryl," I shouted. "What is this?" He didn't answer, but he looked out the living room window, plain as day. Looked right at me. Then, without a word, he reached for the curtains and shut them slowly, like I was some stranger casing the place. My phone buzzed. It was a text from him. "We're starting fresh. Without you." That was it. After 9 years of marriage. No warning.
No conversation.
Just a suitcase, a locked door, and a message. I stood there for almost an hour, in wet scrubs, with tired feet and $43 in my wallet. My whole life had just flipped, and they didn't even have the decency to lie to my face. I sat on the porch step until the light above me flickered out. Then I walked back to my car. That night, I parked behind a grocery store lot and curled up in the front seat, holding my coat around me like a blanket. I didn't cry. Not yet. That came later. The next day, I went to work like nothing happened. I had a shift at 7 a.m. I showered at the gym and brushed my teeth in the staff bathroom. I told no one. I just kept moving. I did that for weeks. I found cheap motels when I could, but they ate up most of my paycheck. Food became whatever was left in the break room. I'd bring home uneaten sandwiches from the kitchen at work and pretend it was dinner. One morning, I must have dozed off in the parking lot outside the nursing home because I woke up to a knock on my window. It was Miss Elaine. Her mom was one of the residents. She didn't say much, just looked at me and asked if everything was okay.
Elite.
Said I was fine, just tired. She nodded and walked away. But the next morning, she handed me a folded piece of paper. "When you're ready," she said. It was an address. And a note. "You shouldn't be living like this." Turned out Miss Elaine owned properties all over Durham. She just opened a small adult care facility and needed someone to manage it, someone she could trust. She said she saw how I worked, how I treated people. She didn't care about my situation. She saw value in me when the people I loved most didn't. She gave me a room in one of her duplexes. No rent the first month. Said to pay her back when I was on my feet. I signed a contract to run her new care home. Within 3 months, I had staff under me, was managing schedules, even doing the books. I learned everything: state inspections, licensing, payroll, insurance. I took night courses to fill in the gaps. 6 months later, I was managing 2 more facilities for her. I barely recognized myself. For the first time in years, I felt useful. Not just needed, but respected. Then she sat me down one day and said she was retiring. She wanted to sell the first facility, my facility, to someone she trusted. Someone who wouldn't run it into the ground. I took out a business loan and bought it.
Me.
A woman who'd been thrown out like trash with $43 to her name. Now a business owner. I changed the name, painted the walls, hired better staff. I started doing outreach at local hospitals and built partnerships that brought in steady referrals. We went from struggling to full capacity in 2 months. Then one Tuesday morning just before lunch, I heard the front door chime. 2 people walked in, one behind the other.
Trina.
And behind her, Daryl. They didn't recognize me at first. Not in a blazer. Not with my hair blown out and heels on. Not with my name on the door that read, Administrator L. Tisdale. They were holding resumes. She was still talking before she even looked up. We're here about the job posting. We'll take anything. I smiled and said, of course, let's talk. Because they didn't know yet. But they were about to.
Trina sat down first.
She wore a cheap blazer over a wrinkled top. Her nails were chipped. Her mouth moved fast, like it always did when she was nervous, but trying to fake confidence. I used to help manage patient records at my last job, she said. Scheduling meds, that kind of thing. I can work nights, weekends, whatever. Daryl stood behind her like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to speak yet. His face was thinner than I remembered. His shirt was too big. And he wouldn't make eye contact. I didn't say a word about who I was. Not yet. I just asked questions. What kind of experience do you have with adult care regulations? I said. Trina blinked. Well, I took care of my mama before she passed. I know what people need. And what about conflict resolution? I said. We deal with families, doctors, social workers. She shifted in her seat. I'm a people person, she said, forcing a laugh. I looked at Daryl. And you? He cleared his throat. Maintenance. I fix stuff. I can help with the grounds, janitorial, whatever you need. There it was. The man who once mocked me for wasting my life in scrubs, now begging for a janitor's job.
I didn't feel joy, not yet.
I felt something colder. Like I'd left part of myself behind on that porch step and couldn't quite find it anymore. I asked for their resumes. They were printed on flimsy paper, smudged at the edges.
No references. No dates.
Nothing that would hold up to HR. Trina tried to cover for it. We've had a rough year, she said. Lost everything when our last place burned down. That was a lie. I knew that house hadn't burned. They'd probably been evicted. Maybe for not paying rent. Maybe for fighting too much. Who knows? But I didn't let it show. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and said, you're both underqualified. And we don't hire people without background checks or verifiable references. Trina's eyes narrowed. You don't know who we are, she snapped. You think you're too good for us? That's when I leaned forward, just enough to look her dead in the eye. No, Trina, I said. I know exactly who you are. The question is, do you remember who I am? She stared at me,
confused at first.
Then I saw it. The slow change in her face, like a mask slipping. Her mouth parted just slightly. Lena, she said, barely above a whisper. Daryl's head jerked up like he'd been hit. He took a step forward. Wait, hold on. No, I said. You don't get to speak yet. I stood up.
Calm. Cold.
I came home after a double shift and found my suitcase on the porch. Remember that? I stood out there in the rain while you laughed inside. Daryl, you texted me that you were starting fresh. Like I was trash. Neither of them spoke. I kept going. I lived in my car for 3 weeks. Ate leftover sandwiches. Worked every shift I could. And you both walked around like you'd won something. Trina's voice cracked. We didn't have a choice. No, I cut her off. You had a choice. You could have talked to me. You could have been decent. Instead, you stole the home I built, and now you want to walk into the one I built again and ask for help. Daryl tried to say something, but I didn't care. He had nothing to say that I wanted to hear. Get out, I said, before I call security. They didn't move at first. Trina just sat there, stunned. Daryl looked at me like he finally realized what he threw away. As they turned to leave, I added, "And if I ever hear either of you used my name as a reference, I'll make sure you never work in this field again. Don't test me." They left. Quiet.
Small. Beaten.
But that wasn't the end. A few days later, I got a call from a mutual friend, Janine. Said Daryl and Trina had been telling people I stole their business. That I used family money to buy my way up. That I was just bitter and trying to ruin them. I didn't respond.
Not yet.
At first, I tried to ignore the gossip. Janine warned me that Trina and Daryl were talking, telling people I stole their business idea, that I used some mystery inheritance from an aunt in Atlanta to buy a facility they'd been planning for years. That I tricked Miss Elaine into handing it over and cut them out of what was rightfully theirs. I could have laughed, but it wasn't funny. Not when I started getting cold shoulders from a few vendors. Not when a staff member pulled me aside and asked, "Did you really take over your husband's company?" That's when I realized something. They weren't just bitter. They were strategic. They knew I was growing fast, building a name for myself in local health networks, and they wanted to poison it before it got too strong. So I did what I always do. I worked. I documented everything: contracts, email exchanges, the loan documents, the lease agreement with Miss Elaine. I even dug up my old pay stubs from the weeks I was sleeping in my car, just to remind myself how far I'd come. Then the real twist hit. A state health inspector showed up, unscheduled. Said there'd been an anonymous complaint about unlicensed practices and unsafe patient ratios at my facility. I knew what this was. It wasn't just sabotage. It was personal. But I played it cool. Walked the inspector through every corner of the building. Showed them the records, the logs, the emergency plans, the inspection sheets, even the staff certifications. Everything was clean. At the end of the visit, the inspector looked at me and said, "Someone really doesn't want you to succeed." I didn't answer. I just nodded. I already knew who filed that complaint. A week later, I got a copy of the report. Not only did we pass, the inspector marked us as exceeding compliance in 5 areas. I framed it and hung it in the front office. That same week, I found out Trina had applied for a job at a competitor across town, lied on the application, used me as a reference. She listed herself as a former assistant director of my facility. That's when I called their HR director and sent over everything. The texts, the security footage from the day they came in, the real story. They pulled her application within the hour. But I wasn't done. I contacted a lawyer and asked what I could do about defamation. He said it would be tough, but not impossible, especially if I could show financial harm. So I waited, collected emails, tracked every vendor that backed out, every contract that stalled because of their rumors. I wasn't rushing this. Revenge isn't about speed. It's about precision. In the meantime, I learned something else. Trina and Daryl weren't just failing. They were getting desperate. Word got around that they'd been evicted again. Someone saw them sleeping in a borrowed van near the Walmart off Roxborough Road, the same street I used to sleep on. I drove past them one night. I saw Trina curled up in the front seat. Daryl in the back, shirtless, probably sweating through another humid North Carolina night. I didn't feel pity. I felt calm, because now I had what they could never fake: respect, stability, control. And I wasn't done making sure they never forgot what they threw away. I waited until I had everything lined up. Every document, every email, every statement from staff and vendors who'd heard their lies. My lawyer helped draft a formal cease and desist. It laid out the damage. Lost contracts, reputational harm, false employment claims. It named both of them. It threatened legal action if they didn't stop speaking about me or using my name in any way. I had it hand-delivered to the address Trina listed on a recent job app, an extended stay motel on the edge of town. The same place we used to say was one step from the streets. I waited 3 days. Then I got the email. From Daryl. Subject line: "Can we talk?"
No apology.
Just a pathetic attempt to explain. He said he was ashamed of how things went down, that he wasn't himself back then, that everyone deserves a second chance.
I didn't reply.
Instead, I did something better. A new facility was opening on the north side, a huge contract with a state that would bring in more patients than we'd ever handled. I'd already submitted my proposal, but I added something else, a file. Every false claim Trina and Daryl had made. A list of the fake references, the inspector's visit, the HR call. I positioned it like this. We operate with integrity, even when attacked. Here's how we handled it. 2 weeks later, I got the contract. That contract made me the lead provider for 3 counties. I opened a new location, then another. And then I did something I never planned. I bought the house. My house. The one they threw me out of. It had gone into foreclosure. They'd stopped paying the mortgage just months after I left. The bank listed it at a loss. I paid cash. I didn't even move in. I let it sit for a few weeks. Then I scheduled a demolition. I invited a few people from work, popped a folding chair on the sidewalk and watched as the machines tore it down, piece by piece. The bedroom where I once cried myself to sleep. The porch where I sat with $43 to my name.
Gone.
When the dust cleared, I had the lot leveled and turned it into a free health screening site. We set up tents every other weekend. Nurses. Food trucks. Blood pressure checks. I even had a banner made. Fresh starts happen here. A few months after that, I saw them again. I was walking into the grocery store near my office. Trina was at the customer service desk, arguing about a returned bottle of shampoo. Daryl stood beside her, eyes low, holding a plastic bag of generic cereal and milk. They saw me. Trina opened her mouth, maybe to speak, maybe to spit out another excuse. I just walked past. Didn't slow down. Didn't blink. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. They threw me out like I was nothing. Humiliated me.
Starved me. Lied about me.
But I didn't just survive. I built something stronger. I made sure they would never escape the shadow of what they did. That's not bitterness. That's justice.
And it's mine.